right, welcome. What's up, my ninjas? This is the Shaman coming at you, and we've got a really juicy podcast ahead of us today. I'm hanging out with my ninja Arnaud. He's a real fucking ninja, so we're gonna have some fun today talking about what goes on the dark side of being a liberated man. He's got a lot of good things to say, and I would say this guy is one of these what I'd call a dark knight. He's a guy who's seen a lot, done a lot, been a lot, traveled the world, and really made himself into something that's quite unique in the landscape of men in this modern world. So I'm excited to see what comes up. We haven't scripted any of this. This is going to be completely freestyle, so it's going to be fun for you guys as well. So whatever happens next. But I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. So welcome, brother.
Thank you very much, man. It's an honor.
Yeah, awesome. Me too, man. So really what I wanted to actually open up as a beginning context here is the life of a warrior. What does it mean to be a warrior, and how do we sort of, how do you get connected into the warrior? And just to give a little bit of context from what I understand, and I want you to fill in the details. You've lived a life as somebody that's been involved with military, been involved with security, been involved with, let's say hotspots on the planet with things going on. So yeah, and you've also worked in the jungles to protect animals and doing really cool things. So there's a lot of really cool history that I think that you could really bring to the conversation. And I'm really curious to know a little bit about like who you are and how you got to the place that you are. So I'm going to sort of a quick nutshell, a bit of an elevator pitch of where you're coming from and who you are, so people get the vibe of where we are coming from in this podcast.
Yeah, sure. Actually, your introduction was very flattering. And, my first reflex when I hear all that is like, oh, man, compared to some guys out there, I'm just a rookie. And I mean, on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. On my Facebook group, I've got stuff popping up that talks about all the heroes of the wars in Vietnam or the Pacific or whatever conflict. And I'm like, man, those guys, I'm just a rookie compared to them. But it's true that I've come quite a way as well. So, to answer your question, well, I'm a Swiss citizen born in Switzerland in a shitty small town, industrial small town that totally missed the turn of the 21st century. So became increasingly doom and gloom, even in Switzerland, right? Quite a shitty family as well. And I think I can say that. And because of that, I always wanted to escape. I always wanted the adventure. I always wanted the exotic. Definitely always had that push for seeing how it is out there, and for also all sorts of psychological reasons and stuff. I was always attracted to the military world, and in Switzerland that's pretty convenient because you've got your compulsory service to do. So I did that in a good unit. I pushed it a bit further with going higher the ranks, which in Switzerland happens very fast. By 21, I thought I'd lived my military adventure and that was it. And I had to become serious and go back to studying for a good job and become a normal somebody like society wants us to. So I joined the great School of Engineers in Lausanne in Switzerland, which was great. I mean, it's an incredibly great school, and that really pushed me mentally as well. I learned a lot, but I passed first year, and after that, I was like, yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention it was to become an engineer in life sciences. Passed first year, but realized that it wasn't for me. And we're talking 2004, 2005, and I was seeing these guys in, the war in Iraq that had just started by then, and those civilians making shitload of money to protect the important people there. And I was like, man, those guys, they have the best job in the world, man. I want to do that. That's what I want. So, yeah, but based on my military experience back then, there wasn't much I could do. So eventually I had to make a choice, which was to join the French Foreign Legion, which I served for 5 years from 2006 to 2011. What should I say about the time? I would say you got to go there with the right reasons to go there. And for me, it was to rebound towards the private security industry. I never joined to stay for 15 years or more than that. There's just not enough freedom. And I suffered of it, really. It's a shitty lifestyle. You have no you have no freedom, basically. So you're paying a high price. That being said, I'm still very fond of the Legion. I'm still proud of what I've done. I'm still very good friends with all the societies of ex guys. I'm still doing my best to find jobs for the ex Legion guys out there, etc., etc. And yeah, I got out of it in 2011. And because I was a medic in the Legion, it was quite easy back then to find work in the what we call the private circuit. So yeah, since 2011, I've protected ships. I've been site medic on various mining projects in Africa. I went to Iraq, like finally, like 10 years later, I did it. So in 2014, I I did close protection for oil and gas engineers in southern Iraq for a year and a half. Uh, and after that, tried to stop contracting, didn't quite succeed. I got yeah, like in and out of that private circuit, as we call it. 2016, I took that awesome job that you mentioned before, which was to protect elephants in Congo. Excellent job for a year. Tried to get out of the circuit after that and become a personal trainer in the UK, which was a, let's call it a good lesson, not a failure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And eventually got back into the circuit since 2018. Yeah, only Africa since then, mainly for the mining industry as a security manager, but I've also been a medic in the oil and gas sector. I've trained an African military as well for a little short contract for the US Department of State, if I am correct. All those things I can say.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And yeah, that's what I do now. Basically, I live and work in Africa, 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off. So an excellent rhythm of work. Security manager for a big mining company in a dangerous country that's full of terrorists. And so every 6 weeks, then I get another 6 weeks of vacation, which I can use for pretty much what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, with the current situation, it's rather shitty and it's not easy to travel. Still doing my best to take advantage of it. So yeah, I think that sums it up, man.
That's really cool, man. No, like once again, it gives a bit of a frame of who you are, and like hopefully guys can get a bit of a vibe of what that history's like. And I mean, some of the listeners may come from military backgrounds themselves, but a lot of guys don't. And I think there's often a curiosity. I mean, I can speak for myself. I mean, I had a curiosity about military mindsets and military kind of lifestyle when I was young too. I very nearly joined the military when I was quite young, because I felt the draw towards guns and discipline and focus and brotherhood and that all that sort of glory shit that we take as part of the journey. I think it's for the better that I didn't go down that path, but ultimately I still have a lot of respect and I think there's something in it for sure. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore a little bit today with you. And I know there's a lot of shit in it as well. There's a lot of things that are not so good. And I think a lot of guys also need to realize that it's not what it's probably marketed to be. And there's probably a lot of stuff that makes it messy, but I'm curious to kind of, separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of what you got out of your journey as a soldier warrior and also as a security man that you are now, security agent. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one thing jumps to mind for sure is that I am not the typical profile of the good military guys. Definitely not. And the more I look back, the more I see who has been a good guy in those things and who hasn't. I think I'm way too independent, way too free, way too selfish, some people would say. Well, to me, selfishness is a normal part of being human. That word doesn't even exist in my vocabulary.
Nice.
That's for sure. Because if I look at the guys who've been good soldiers, like who had good reputation, who were the good guy in the unit, and I know such guys, some of them have been very, very successful afterwards inside the Legion and even outside. One of them actually got a medal by Donald Trump 3 years ago, by Donald Trump himself for Afghanistan with the US military.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, those guys, I've noticed they are very positive and happy no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they are a bit treated like shit sometimes, they don't care too much about it. They accept.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think too much about how much of a life they could have outside. They don't think about alternate ways of solving a problem. They don't think outside the box, basically. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that looking down on them, because society needs guys like that, and not just in the military. Like those guys are useful everywhere,
Mm.
but that just isn't me.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was in the Legion, we would have a pause, and like it happens all the time in the military, you have absolutely nothing to do, and you would speak with your comrades or fellow soldiers, as you would call them. And I would be the guy who would always try to bring up ideas about business, about how to make passive income, about how to get more girls, about how to have a better life, you know.
Hmm.
Each time I would approach a problem, I would always try to approach holistically. That's why I find it so hard to connect nowadays with most other people, is each time somebody asks me for advice about something, like there is no clear cut answer. I always start by answering, okay, it depends what you want. It depends where you're at in your life.
Hmm.
And that's really visible in the financial world, for example. When people ask me for investment, like
Advice.
it's
Yeah.
never an easy answer. So you pretty much get what I mean, right?
I love it. Yeah. Well, what I love about you in particular, and I mean, I don't know you that well, but from what I know of you, you're a really sort of well-rounded character in a weird way. Like you've decided to kind of go on a lot of different unique paths. Like I understand that myself because I chose to be a little bit of an outsider and take a kind of a more of a zigzag traversing kind of path up the mountain of life rather than the direct route most people tend to go, which is the sort of the mainstream consensus. But I think that, and it is something that I think it's really cool about your character, and it's really something that I admire in general, which is, being a free thinker, being what I would call a meta programmer, somebody that's able to kind of be inside of a context, but also have at least some part of yourself outside of the context, thinking about other things. And it's also about being resourceful, in my opinion, as well. And it does bring up something interesting in my mind as well, because I think when you're talking about these guys that are super specialized in the military and they're super high level, super focused and very good at what they do, I would say maybe this is me speaking out of my ass, but it's like in my view, it's like they've got a soldier mentality, whereas it's different to like a warrior mentality. Like a warrior mentality is like, you're actually thinking resourcefully, you're thinking outside the box. It's larger than just the role of the soldier. It's larger than just the context of the military. It's about, being somebody that has resources, being somebody that has goals, being somebody that has boundaries, being somebody who is thinking outside the box in creative ways. And ultimately, which is also something I want to introduce into this conversation as well, it's ultimately about starting to bridge the warrior into the lover and the magician and the king and these other kind of parts. So I talk about those things as metaphors, by the way. It might be a bit weird for some of these listeners to hear me sort of saying like lover and king and magician and warrior. So just to put a bit of context around that, I'm speaking from those things as archetypes, as ideas, as aspects of psyche, aspects of our character that we all have within us. So the warrior, for example, as I mentioned, it's about forward momentum. It's about fire. It's about pushing through boundaries. It's about saying yes to your goals and committing no matter what, and and facing things like severity and suffering and difficulty and ordeals with the kind of warrior spirit of like, all right, this is part of something. This is taking me somewhere. This is a part of a process. Whereas the lover, for example, is more about expanding into feeling, experiencing beauty, going into connection, becoming somebody that's more aligned to let's say the emotional side of life as opposed to just the goal setting or the success side of life. So to bounce that back to you, what happened to you that led you from, let's say, the warrior aspect into more of the lover aspect in your journey? Because you're also a fucking good seducer. So I think that's good to bring into the story as well.
Well, thanks for the compliment. Nowadays, with almost no social interaction and even Tinder almost not working anymore, I would love to believe that I am. But yeah, I've definitely progressed on that path. And thank you very, very much forever to the natural lifestyles, to yourself, to James Marshall, and whoever was there in that workshop in New York City in 2015. Man, that's been an accelerator of my life. Like, first off, seduction, and then my life in general. Um, yeah, if you allow me, because you said we were
Please, man,
freestyling,
go
and
for it.
I digress all the time, and that's
Let's play,
my
man.
big problem.
Let's go wherever you
But yeah,
like.
it's very interesting that you highlighted the difference between soldier and warrior, because traditionally in our societies, if you talk, I don't know, 14th century, maybe Middle Ages, the warriors, they were also the lords, they were also the kings, they were leading by example. You fought because you had a kingdom to protect, etc., etc. So the people fighting the wars were actually warriors. And now with the evolution of society and the world as it has become, like right now nowadays, as a soldier, as the guy who fights the wars, you are basically a tool for politicians, and that's a hell of a big difference. You still have to learn the skills and qualities as a warrior, but it's limited
Mhm.
because at some point politics become more important than actually winning the fight. That's where you have all this stupidity, all the nonsense that you see nowadays on battlefields. Like I don't even know where I would start if I had to quote examples of the bullshit you see in current conflicts.
Mhm.
So and I want to stress as well that you learn the skills, but you also learn the qualities. That's two different things. One of them is about doing things, and the other one is about being something. But again, it's limited, and it's got to be because at some point politics take over from the purely how could I say that the purely combative aspects of the fight, if you will.
Right.
Okay, so I just wanted
It's
to
a good
mention
point.
that.
I guess just to put a quick note on that, which is a key that I think everybody needs to acknowledge in these days, which is that so much of these contexts, and especially wartime context these days, is a business model, right? It's a business model first, and then it's it's everything else second. Whereas if, like you said, you go back to the Middle Ages, it was about kingdom, it was about land, it was about community, it was about people. So there's a very different ethic, a very different value structure around
A
that. So
lot was about faith as well back then, which is
right.
even above land and people and kingdom and stuff. But to answer the original question,
Mm-hmm.
it happened very naturally for me to align the warrior and the seducer, because at the end of the day, I'm a man and I've got balls and I've got testosterone, and all that is exacerbated by my path. I mean, you are in the military, you are with other guys who are pretty much only like you. Like, you train hard, you are trained to be confident, you are trained to take leadership at some point, so the testosterone level is very high. So by aligning with that, just with my body, well, you want to fuck a bunch of women. That's just normal.
Yeah.
So, of course, you want to fuck a bunch of women, but you're not a psychopath, right? So you want to actually connect with them. You want to learn to have more than just the mechanical, physical interaction. So you want to learn seduction. And back then, for me, like I had no clue. Like, I'm not one of these gifted guys who was raised with three bigger sisters who naturally understands women, or I'm none of that archetype. And back then I was like, I was already having more sex than the average male, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
because you are driven by your testosterone, that's for sure. But I wasn't satisfied. I was seeing other guys around myself, like naturals,
Mm-hmm.
who were having great results, and I was like, yeah, why not me? And my first reaction was to think that I was less and I didn't deserve and I was unworthy. But at the same time, I was like, hold on a second, I'm sure something can be done about it. So I started to dig into that, to search. YouTube back then in 2014 was just starting to boom, and that's when I saw the legendary speeches of James and yourself at the 21 convention back then, and how it was. And I was like, damn, man, that resonates, because those guys are holistic.
Mm-hmm.
What those guys teach you really comes from the core. I mean, it's natural. It comes from within. It's none of that Los Angeles bullshit that you hear about from the Los Angeles pickup artists and all that stuff. So, but really, to answer your question as to why did I get into seduction and stuff, simply because I have testosterone, I have balls, I want to fuck a bunch of women. That's normal. That's being a man, and I wanted to do it properly. And then comes the feelings, of course. And that's another aspect that may be interesting for you. I really have no problem feeling something for women. Because most men, if you look around, they're scared of their own feelings.
Mhm.
That's why that's how they treat women like shit, by shutting down their own feelings. I really have no problem with that.
Yeah.
And I would like to conclude about that, mentioning something. Once I felt that my business career, my reconversion career after the Legion was done, that I had proven myself, especially after the, oh yeah, I didn't mention that one, the little volunteering with the Kurdish Peshmerga that I did in northern Iraq back then. I was like, okay, now I really feel like I don't have anything to prove to myself anymore in terms of that. So there's no reason to be scared of my own feelings and the more human side of myself.
Mm.
And I remember clearly having a dream about that. That's how much my subconscious um, accepted it, if you want.
Beautiful.
So yeah, that was the process.
I love it, man. That's cool. And just as a quick aside, because I'll put a bit of theory down, like something that I think about is really what we're talking about here in some higher level is pathways, you know, journeys. Like how does a person grow up? And obviously we're talking about you, and I'm sort of jumping in and talking a bit about myself as well. But like I look at it like, you know, we don't know what we don't know. So we're just kind of like innocent children born into a world of stuff. And we get programmed by that stuff. And the basic program that most people go through is that they just kind of pick up a whole bunch of unconsciousness. So they pick up a bunch of unconscious programs from their culture, from their parents, from their education system, from the faith around them, from the political situations, from, you know, the things they see, hear, feel, and experience. And because we are, you know, in some sense, advanced primates, we learn through mimicry. We learn through watching, observing, and kind of becoming some kind of version of what we see around us. And that leads us to kind of have to go through a journey of evolution in some sense. So you could say that the early evolution is really this kind of childhood evolution, and there is even a whole series of archetypes that have got to do with the young boy learning to be a boy, and then from the boy learning to be a young man, and then from the young man learning to kind of become a man. But in a nutshell, you know, the first major archetype, in my opinion, that is needed to be activated inside of the journey of let's say selfhood or sovereignty or self-awakening or kingship is the warrior. Because the warrior is like, fuck, I'm in the world, I'm alone, I need to defend myself, I need to take care of myself, I need to get what I need to protect myself. And for me, for example, I learned that in the schoolyard. You know, I learned that when I was 5 or 6 years old in the schoolyard, and feeling like I had to protect myself because I was the funny looking, smelly kid that everybody wanted to pick on. So I had to learn how to either be stealth, or also to be able to hold my ground and to fight back if I needed to. And, you know, it was also about trying to make friends with allies and trying to like set things up. So when you really look at that, it's all warrior stuff. You know, it's all just the baby warrior sort of learning to step up. And then the next logical level is the lover. So the lover is all about feeling, connection, as I've already mentioned before. And the lover really wants to get out there and wants to feel the world. And in some sense, I think the lover is a super big key, because the lover is all about the heart. It's about the heart of connection, the heart of beauty, the heart of understanding. And that's necessary because the lover really gives context to the warrior on a higher level. Because the warrior is important, because sometimes you do need to swing your sword and you need to get some space and you need to say fuck off to certain things, or you need to say yes and really barge through difficulties to get where you need to go. But the lover is really what brings peace. It's what brings some kind of calm and tranquility and some kind of harmony to that intensity that you're talking about. So that fire and that power of the man needs to be complemented by the softness and the beauty of the feminine in some sense. And that includes happening inside of the individual, that includes what is happening inside of us, I should say. And then we've got the king, which is really about, you know, building like a center and building a core of what we are and how we evolve, and building a territory and growing into maturity. Because once you've got a bit of warrior and you've got a bit of lover, then you've kind of got the primary fire and water. And then that kind of creates this next level of being able to create your lifestyle, which is also something we can talk about in a minute, because I think that's also another secondary conversation that you sort of mentioned a little bit about. It's like, how do you want to spend your time? How are you going to make your money? What are you going to do to be independent? You know, how are you going to like really build your kingdom, whatever that is? And then finally, in my stack, anyway, this is the mythology that I run, is that you've got the magician. So the magician's an interesting one, because the magician's really about thinking outside the box, looking at your mindsets, looking at your paradigms, looking at your baseline assumptions, looking at how you operate and how that works. Now, what I came up with many years ago was that the ultimate archetype, in my opinion, is the romantic adventurer spiritual warrior. So it's like romantic because you have to have something that's beautiful. You know, romantics are about beauty. You know, they're about enjoyment. They're about pleasure. They're sensualists. They're hedonists. You know, they're about like living in the world. They don't deny the world. They're not like monks that dig caves and just sit in the cave and just stare at the wall for their whole lives. They're active. You know, they're smelling the flowers. They're dancing. They're dating women. They're playing music. They're eating food. You know, they love to fuck.
Feminine energy.
Absolutely, he's absolutely. So that's the romantic, and then you've got the adventurer, which is another interesting thing too, because the adventurer is different to the warrior. Like an adventurer goes out into the playground of life, and enjoys it, and you know he wants to go and make friends and see what new territories he can explore with his joy and with his interest and with his curiosity. So an adventure is much more of a playful attitude. It's almost like the fool in the tarot, for example. It's like you kind of just sort of dancing through life and just like taking it as it comes and enjoying life. And that's very different to the warrior, because the warrior is a bit more of a conqueror. You know, the warrior tends to look at things as a bit more of a conflict-based or kind of adversarial-based archetype of life. And then you've got the spiritual aspect, which some people don't like the word spiritual because it has negative connotations for them, which is also fine. So if you don't like the word spiritual, you could transform it into existential. So existential and spiritual is similar. It's about your position in life. How do you see things? How do you feel things? How do you understand things? What is your primary relationship to life? So I see spirituality as our relationship to higher context and how we bring context into our lives in a functional way. Like you said before, it's about faith in that middle-aged period, because like that was the spiritual aspect, and that's a huge driver. You know, I mean, like people went to strange foreign lands across big dangerous oceans to go and like, you know, to do crazy things because they believed in their God and they wanted their God to be the true God, and they felt like they were representing. So in some sense, you know, that's still a bit of like a warrior kind of focus of spirituality, which is like shaman gangland or something that happens. But you know, there is definitely a world of spirituality that's important. And then the warrior part, which we've been talking about. So the warrior is about getting real, like not bullshitting yourself, being honest with yourself, and also picking up the tools, picking up the skills. You know, it's about learning to not just be an armchair sideline kind of commentator. It's about getting on the field and enjoying life and getting out there and saying yes to the dark side as well as the light side, and really holding that. So I bring all that together. This is the reason I wanted to bring that into the conversation now, is because when I train guys and when we do a lot of the stuff in the TNL workshops, I really love to give guys the seed of the idea that they're part of the social special forces. So they're becoming something that's unique. They're becoming something they have to think on their feet. They have to be smart. They have to be strategic. And they have to consciously say to themselves, I'm not like everybody else. And I don't want to be like everybody else. I am unique. I'm different. I am powerful. I stand out. And I'm going to do something. And it's okay to be undercover. So I like that metaphor of the special forces, because it's like you've got to be slick, you know, you've got to be smooth, and you've got to be able to be dynamic in the moment. And also, which is something I'd love to bounce off you and talk a little bit about, you've also got to learn about how to share leadership and how to, you know, let the woman be the leader as well as let yourself be the leader. Or if you're working with a wingman, how do you work with your wingman in a stylish kind of way or in a smooth way that can make things kind of work? So I like this idea of the next level identity of man. And it's not for me to say what the next level identity of man is. I think everybody has their own version of that, and everybody should be free to be able to explore their own version of that. But like I said, in my mind, the romantic adventurer spiritual warrior is a very powerful combination that creates a bit of a melting pot for this social special forces capacity that I think is possible inside of people. So what I wanted to bounce back to you on that is like how do you associate your, let's say, your military background or the mindset you came from? Because in some sense you could say that you come from a hyper masculine base. You know, you had a very strong masculine base.
Yeah. True.
And then how have you found the journey into bringing that hyper masculinity, which in some sense I think it's a real treat to actually talk to you, and it's probably a real treat for other guys to kind of have access to a guy like you, because some guys just don't even know what masculinity is because they've been kind of fucked up by what society is telling them. And another key point that I want to just quickly bridge, and then I'll bounce it back to you, is that there are certain key challenges that people have to go through to be able to understand themselves and to free themselves from certain things. Now, one key initiation, I think, is men have to go through the initiation of violence. So, and that's something that happens at some point. Like, you have to learn how to confront other men on masculine terms. And that ultimately is an initiation of violence. It's about, like, can you stand on your own feet in the moment when somebody's pushing you around? And maybe that was as simple as just standing up for yourself in front of a bully in school. Or maybe it was something that was more intense, like you had to actually fight in some shitty neighborhood for, you know, your freedom or whatever, because people were running around causing dramas. Or in your case, man, you literally manifested that by joining the military and going through these security kind of operations where, you know, imminent violence is part of the territory. You know, imminent violence is part of reality on a daily basis. So I'm curious to hear about how you faced that initiation of violence. And the other one I want to quickly sort of put on the table is that there's another initiation which people often don't understand and they miss, which is the initiation into the feminine, which is learning to deal with vulnerability. Because one of the biggest things that guys have to face, and it's interesting, like even like guys like you, like I train guys like you from time to time, and they come in from these very high-end specialized, you know, like they're fighter pilots or they're SAS or whatever they are. They're like extreme individuals that do hardcore shit, and they're scared fucking shitless of talking to women because, and it's like they would rather have a knife fight than go and talk to a woman, which shows me that there's a very real fear around vulnerability. There's a very real fear around being seen in yourself, because I think the primary assumption that a lot of guys have is like, I need to be something, you know, I need to have something, I need to represent something. Otherwise I'm worthless. Otherwise I'm empty. Otherwise I'm meaningless. So on that point, I think that there is a very important initiation that men have to go through, which is the facing of the feminine, the facing of the scary vagina monster, and realizing that it's not a scary vagina monster actually. And even if it is, it's not as dangerous as you think it is. So, you know, I've kind of ranted a bit there, but just have a bounce off that and let me know what you think about any of those concepts and how you feel about that.
Yeah, actually, if you just allow me, I was about to ask you one quick question. When you mentioned these four characteristics or four avatars, which is, as you said, romantic adventurer, spiritual warrior, right? Yeah. Which one of these four is the hardest to teach to the guys? Statistically, generally?
It's a really good question, man. And it sort of depends on the individual. And it comes back to something that you said earlier, which I think is really intelligent as well, is it's individually contextualized. You know, because there are some guys that are just really good, like natural sort of, you know, they're naturally connected with their romantic side because maybe they're musicians, maybe they're artists, you know, maybe they have a kind of a background where that's it. So, and this is a good thing to also understand about archetypes is it's not about being a master of all of them, because nobody is really a master of all of them. You just learn that you're in the story of them and they're all part of us. And everybody has a different constellation, I call it. You know, everybody has a different proportion of different things. Some guys might have more of let's say a so-called feminine side. So they tend to be more feeling orientated, or they tend to be more intuitive orientated, or they tend to be more creative and maybe display, let's say, soft characteristics. Like maybe they're softly spoken, maybe they like to, you know, they like to create things in a more sort of soft and subtle way. And then there's, as opposed to, you know, what comes to my mind is another good friend of mine is a hyper masculine dude who, you know, he loves Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's a corporate lawyer. You know, he's got a massive fucking jaw. He just loves pushing weights. You know, I mean, you just, you know, like this dude's a fucking, like a man's man, you know? And it's interesting because, I mean, honestly, I'm a bit more of a softer style man when I really look at myself. Like I'm definitely, I spend a lot of time thinking about things. I spend a lot of time going into like the subtleties and the feelings and creating a lot. So, but I also have that hard side of me as well at different times. But the point is that it depends on the individual. And yeah, that's the short answer really. And I mean, some guys might have, you know, and once again, I've seen the whole gamut. I mean, I've had guys that are already excellent with women, but they're missing some context. You know, they don't really like, they get the romantic side, they get the adventurous side, but they miss the spiritual side. They don't understand there's a higher context or a higher meaning that they can connect with. And that's important too, because I mean, I've had a fair bit of experience. I mean, I'm not the world's best seducer. I don't claim to be, but I've definitely hung out with some of the world's best seducers, and I know what that shit's like. And I can say that, like, it's also not what you expect it to be. You know what I mean? It's like there is definitely cool things, and sometimes it's like awe-inspiring and really like jaw-dropping to see some of the things that are possible. But at the same time, there's a dark side to it, or there's an incompletion to it that needs to be balanced out with some other context and some other kinds of positions of things. So yeah, very much depends on the individual. But honestly, man, the thing that is most lacking in the world, in my opinion, in terms of all the archetypes, is the warrior energy. Because
Bang. Yeah, you get it. That's that. I was sure you would say that actually.
yeah,
I was sure. Of course, it's extremely individual and it's an extremely case by case basis. But I would have imagined that the thing missing the most and the most difficult thing to teach the guys right now in 2021 would be that warrior aspect.
yeah,
Because and not just yourself, but plenty other guys on YouTube and everywhere keep saying it, and I think they're right. The world lacks healthy masculine energy at the moment.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's actually very fashionable in the how can we say that the dominant narrative
The
to
progressive movement of society. Yeah,
yeah yeah, you can call it that, you can call it the media, you can call it the I don't know what, but it's really something that you can feel they are fighting against,
mm,
because in my humble opinion that's what gives us freedom, and there's nothing more dangerous to these people than a free man. So that's why it's the aspect they want to the fight against the most. Please know that I'm no conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying it's one group or another or blah blah
sure.
blah. I think it's much more a matter of the deep unconscious of us humans.
Yep.
Of course there's the Illuminati, there's whatever you want, but that's just a reflection of what's deep down inside of us. And right now at the moment we have a big problem with freedom
Yep.
that's disappearing, with sovereignty, with masculinity, with all these things. So yeah, I haven't forgotten about your original question about how it was pushed into me. This thing, I think, yeah, it's been progressive. I think that warrior aspect thing, that masculine energy thing, it's all about limits. When you hit reality like a wall, and there is no more bullshitting, there is no more blah blah blah, there is no more excuses, you got to do something. I know I'm talking very very abstract now,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it has a lot to do with limits.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the feminine is all about love and moving all the time and changing all the time, where the masculine is something steady and limits.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to elaborate about that, but there was a lot of it in my childhood and upbringing. Then I did military service in Switzerland, which is an interesting thing, because you go through military service, but at the same time you're a citizen of the country, you have some rights. It's a very respectful country of freedom and individual rights. So yeah, you do sports, it's sometimes tough, you're a volunteer for that, but you just bite the bullet, you just how do they call it, you just shut the fuck up, you just yeah, well, you get the idea. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there was an element of that, and then finally there was the Legion. And the Legion is kind of dodgy, because you get there, you're from another country, you have no idea if you have rights or not. And yeah, man, it's they change your name, they change your date of birth, you don't even know how you exist anymore officially anywhere. And you yeah, it's a professional military that goes on proper operations where people get killed and stuff. So it is tough. It's a place you're gonna get punched in the face if you don't do what's being told to you. And it's really that, man, it's limits. There's some limits you cannot fuck with. And I see it as very different from so many things I see in today's society, especially in the civilian jobs I take, where people are constantly trying to how do you say that, to flex the limits, to play with the limits, to think they can get away with something. Well, Legion was nothing about that. If you don't do what you're told to do, you're gonna get punched in the face as best, or you're gonna go for 3 weeks to Legion jail, or or you're gonna get sanctions. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not a flexible system. And then you go, you deploy, you do your missions. it's not always combat missions. It's not always super exciting, but you go to Africa, you see the poverty, you see the shitty conditions. Uh, for me as a medic, I saw a lot of very interesting things from a medical point of view, but that are really bad, right? So you see the world how it is. So I think that was how I had that warrior qualities pushed into me.
Mm-hmm.
So you get tougher. It's all about, okay, let's shut the fuck up and do the job, man. No matter how hard it is, you do it, and that's how every soldier is trained, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Some more than others, obviously. So, but I was always careful during all that time that they would not break me completely. That they would not make me a passive guy, a tired guy, a guy who would give up on his freedom and independence. I was the kind of guy who was always reading books when he had nothing to do, whereas the others would be playing video games or watching football or getting drunk. I was the guy either working out or reading books.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, like a lot of guys would not like it because that makes you somebody different. And in a place like the military, it's not a very good idea to be different from the others,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
except if you go to very specialized units that really respect individuals. And most of the time, it's special forces work like that. You can be your own human being as long as you do the job.
Mm-hmm.
In normal, conventional, let's call them conventional military units, you better not be too different because that's not going to be good for your reputation. And there's a lot of a herd mentality, and it's not good to go against that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's to answer the first part of the question. Now, about the guys who are scared by everything feminine and vulnerable and stuff like that, I would just tell them, okay, so if you're scared of not being man enough because you can be vulnerable in front of a woman, then just keep proving yourself. Go pick another bar fight, go volunteer in some conflict, go do some stupid shit, go work out more, go
Mm-hmm.
whatever you need to prove yourself.
Yeah. Do some
Keep
jujitsu.
going that way.
The
But
jujitsu
one
is the
day you're
shit.
gonna, well, yeah, Krav Maga. I love Krav Maga, man, or some kind of boxing or that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, keep doing that until you feel or you embody the satisfaction of feeling that you've done enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then what? Then you can finally let that vulnerability inside of you come out because everybody has it. We've all seen the pictures of soldiers who've just seen too much and who break down and cry, and post-traumatic stress and all these things. They all exist because at the end of the day, we all humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the military nowadays doesn't ask you to be a superhero. Even the military nowadays recognizes that you need psychological attention when you come back from deployment and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fucking there. So why be so scared of it? Again, if the guy is scared of it because he's afraid of not being man enough, keep proving yourself until you don't need to anymore. But you and me will probably agree. I think you gotta reach your 30s and even a bit beyond to understand these things. Because I think when you are 20, I think it's too early,
Especially as a,
unless you're very mature for your age.
especially as a man, right? Because I think as men, we don't, our value as men is not really recognized until 30s and 40s, because that's really when you start to step into your power in terms of like life experience,
Definitely,
materiality, confidence. Yeah.
definitely. As a man in your 20s, everybody tries to take advantage of you. You have no money, you haven't proven yourself, you are desirable to absolutely nobody. If you look at society, what does society do with men in their 20s? Traditionally, they send them to battle because they're cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And but then as time goes, if you can push through that and establish yourself, man, that's when the good stuff is there to come. But I always look back about myself, and also when I see the young guys in the Legion or even in the Swiss military, when I see them in their 20s, I'm not jealous because I'm still fit. I can still do everything I did back then. But I'm more like, whoa, guys, I feel your pain. I know the shit it is to be in your position, but keep being hopeful, keep pushing, keep working for your future life. You're not going to regret it.
I love it. It's like a good friend of mine said. I mean, she's a female, but she's a bit of a warrioress, and she has another unique path. And to kind of put it in a nutshell about her, she was always super unique, and I think she was very drawn to holistic systems, and she had like a kind of a worldview that was different. Like part of her history or her story is that she actually sees energies and she experiences energy. She's actually quite an advanced healer. But because she was experiencing what you could say is an extra dimensional component of the human experience, that made her sort of a weirdo and an outsider for her whole life. And I was talking to her about that. And one thing she said, which was a real good takeaway for me, and I think it's a good takeaway for a lot of people to understand, is that you just got to stick to your guns and you got to keep crafting. You got to keep going, keep. And I mean, in 25 years it took her to build her business, and now she's kicking ass. You know, now she makes 10K plus a week some weeks. You know, now she's free. Now she can do the stuff that she wants. And I mean, she could have given up in any way along that path. You know, she could have said that she was crazy. She could have gone and got a normal job and whatever. But there was something in her that was driven to honor, you know, that path, or to honor that truth that was in her. And it's not easy, you know, I mean, it's not easy to honor yourself. It's not easy to honor the deeper path. And I think what's also scary for a lot of guys, and I think we're kind of lucky in some sense, what's scary for a lot of guys is they just don't have any foundation to even know like how to start that path or how to stick with it. So I guess in some sense, and this is something where like you see a lot of mimicry as well, like you see a lot of young guys just trying to be whatever they see on YouTube. You know, they do see Goggins, for example, or they do see some kind of character and they're like, oh, I have to be like that, so I'm going to copy that, which is kind of cool. It's like, you know, it's like guys used to watch Bruce Lee and then everybody dances like Bruce Lee and does a little, just does the little funny things because they want to be like Bruce Lee. But it's important to recognize everybody has their own story. You have your own story, you have your own path, you have your own journey that you need to honor. Yet at the same time, there are universal principles that you can tap into. And I think you said something really cool, which I think is important, and I can relate to it as well, is sort of choosing to follow your own path and be curious and find things. You know, I can remember when I was, you know, 18, 19, when I first had my big spiritual awakening, books became my best friends, you know, and I had a huge social circle at that life. Sorry, let me say that again. I had a huge social circle at that time in my life, considering I was in a small town. But the truth was that, and as much as I love those people that I was hanging out with and they were my friends and everything was good, what I really needed, which I'm glad that I did, is that I needed to isolate myself and think. I need to get out of the box and just feed my mind with ideas. Even if I didn't understand those ideas completely, I just knew that I just need to wash myself with these ideas. And I would read books and I wouldn't even understand half the book, but it was okay because I intuitively knew that, like, even if I don't understand half of it, it's still going to have an impact on me and it will still make sense in time, which it did. You know, things would come up 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. And I'd remember, that's what that thing was about, or that was that missing piece that I didn't understand at the time. So I think that's an important thing. It's just a little bit of a segue to what we're talking about, but I think it's a really important thing for guys to hear and to understand, especially in this world these days that tends to poo-poo, you know, healthy masculinity. And just on that note, quickly, I'll lay a bit of a theory down, which I think is important, is that, like, we are wild beings. You know, we are born wild. We are born undomesticated. And you look at a toddler doesn't give a shit running around that it's naked. A toddler doesn't care if it's, you know, painting the wall with its poop. It doesn't care. It's not thinking about those things. It's just about, it's free and it's expressive. Now, there is a necessity for, let's say, the elders, whoever they are, whether they be siblings or they be, you know, parental figures or whatever, to give some context to that wild being and to start to put some limits, which is interesting what you said as well about the limits, to start to put some limits on that wildness of, like, you know, don't bite this person, or stop pulling their hair, or, you know, no, you're not supposed to paint the wall with your poop, you know, this kind of stuff. So you get the idea that you're not allowed to do that sort of thing, because slowly but surely you get acclimatized into the world of domesticated society. Now, the problem is that the wildness gets dishonored, which is a shame, because the wildness is where the power is. And this is something that a lot of guys need to understand. If you want to be good in bed, if you want to fuck like a fucking king, if you want to make women feel strong, if you want to make women feel blessed, then you have to be in contact with your wildness. You have to have some contact with your wildness. And
definitely.
and that needs to come from connection with wildness. So that's why it's also really recommended that you do things like get out in nature, get into your body, learn to really be real with yourself. And to a degree, like you said as well, learn to wrestle, learn to fight, learn to stand up for yourself, learn to be strong. Not because you want to go out and cause problems, not because you want to go and be a dick and make the world a crazy place, but because you need to have some assets of wildness inside of the context of your being. And it's just an important point, because society tends to be in this situation where wildness is associated with violence, and wildness is associated with abuse. But I think that's a false assumption. I think that's a really bad correlation, because to be wild and to be free does not mean that you're abusive, and it does not mean that you're dangerous. It just means that you are a wild, free human being. It's a shame that wild, free human beings sometimes do things that are outside of the rules of society. But that's something that we need to also to deal with, is it's the price that we pay for that reality. And the same is true for domestication. Domestication is awesome, right? Because I love the fact that I can walk out in the street and I don't have to worry that somebody's going to come and punch me in the head randomly, because there's laws that stop people from doing that stuff. Or people are not going to just rob me in the street. And as you well know, you go to places in the world where there is no law, and those things do happen because there is nobody making sure that shit's safe. Or they've got guys like you there to try and make shit work.
Well, there is always some kind of law. It's just that sometimes it's in the hands of a proper system that's accepted by everybody, with voting and democracy and all these good things. And in other places, there's absolutely no law, but the power is overtaken by the guy with the biggest gun. And most of the time, that guy is a fucking psycho. So there's absolutely no safety out there. But there's always some kind of rules and always some kind of hierarchy.
I like the way you say that, yeah, because it's true. Like, what pops to mind is when you look at things like the drug wars happening in South America, right? It's like there's bosses that take care of certain areas. There's a boss of the suburb, there's a boss of the city, there's a boss of the region, there's a boss of whatever. And if you want to do business in those areas, man, you better know that guy and you better give him something. Otherwise, there's going to be some pretty big trouble that happens at some point. So that, like you said, it is another form of law, but that's a bit of a segue as well. But still, my point is that wildness doesn't get acknowledged. So, and I think for a lot of guys that are listening, and I'm sure a lot of you guys already get this, this is what's so good about getting into your body, about getting into movement, about learning about archetypes, like animal archetypes, or expressing yourself in raw ways. And it's exactly what we do when we do the warrior training with the natural lifestyles, is we take guys into a deep embodiment of themselves, and we let them be wild, and we acknowledge the fact it's good to be wild. Let's be wild, and we'll enjoy that for a little while. And even if it's just for a few hours or a few days, the vitality and the power that you can start to retrieve from just knowing that that's even possible is huge. And what it does is it literally reframes your entire life. It starts to change the whole context of how you look at yourself, because for a lot of guys out there, nobody ever told them it's okay to beat your chest and scream and yell. It's okay to run around like a fucking wild man with a bunch of other dudes and to have some play, or to wrestle, or to just be real with that part of us. Because the truth is, the part of us that knows how to get along has been around just as long as the part of us that has to fight for its independence. And they're both two sides of the same coin, actually. And we can't have a complete currency, if you will. It's like we can't have a complete thing if we don't have both sides of the coin. Both wildness and domestication need to be met in some kind of balance in between. So once again, a little bit of a segue there. I don't know if you want to make any comments about that, but what I also wanted to bounce back to you as well is what was it like for you when you started to face the scary vagina monster? Because you talked about that a little bit more, but how was it for you coming out of hyper masculine reality and then having to stand in front of a woman and say, hey, I really like you and I'm just a lovable dude and I would really like to spend some time with you? What was that like when you first started doing that?
Well, I don't know if you remember that, but I started that journey from a very ego-centered place. And I remember you quoting that in another place on YouTube. I don't know if you were thinking of me or another guy, because I'm probably not the only one, and there's probably a lot of guys who are like that. But I had a twisted view on these things. I wanted to be the guy that girls like, to be the seductive guy, to be the guy that the girls notice on the streets, Like I would obviously never be able to change my looks or my height or a little bit about my muscles and stuff, but I would have a certain vibe that makes me the suave man, and the girls see me on the street.
Mm-hmm.
That was my point, because I was lacking the self confidence about all these things, and I didn't understand how it works. And I don't know if you agree about that now, but such a thing doesn't really exist. Like, being a seducer is, you have to fucking conquer the woman.
Mm-hmm.
She, most of the time, she's not gonna like you straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's only maybe not even 1% of men out there that girls perceive as being seductive, and most of the time they don't fuck them, because as soon as they speak with them, they're like, oh well, he's got no conversation, he's not that attractive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So being the man is literally about building the attraction, everything by yourself. So I really started the journey from that base. And I thought that somehow, once you've got enough skill, well, you can just engineer a lifestyle, and there's constantly girls around you. And let's say, okay, it's Saturday night, you have nothing special to do. You just pick up your phone and you just call a girl, and you're going to bang her for that night because you are a seducer, you have learned, and then everything is easy. Well, it's not really that way. You're always going to struggle. There's always going to be phases when there's just no girls around. That does exist, even for the best of us. I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody would agree on that.
100%.
Um, it's been a very long journey. It took a lot of time. So first off, there was the workshop in New York, and I want to stress something here, is that I didn't come unprepared to the workshop. I remember I talked to you twice or three times before going. The very last time being actually from New York. I just arrived from my plane, and I spoke with you for a couple of hours, booking sessions with you. And also the cold approaching. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to spend 1 week with the natural lifestyles. I don't want to spend that week of breaking the ice of the approach anxiety. That's something I can destroy by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember doing a lot of such approaches, especially when I was spending a lot of time in the Netherlands back then, which is not at all the best country to do that sort of
Yeah, it's
stuff.
pretty
So
closed, huh? Like
even better, because
beautiful people, but they don't like to say hello to each other so much.
that's exactly how I think about it. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous women, but damn, cold rocks.
Yeah.
Generalizing too much. Maybe I cannot say that on YouTube. I don't know. I'm very sorry for the good, hot and warm Dutch people out there. Really
Well,
sorry, guys.
let's hope they're getting the feedback and they're changing, because the truth is we do train a lot of Dutch guys and a lot of Norwegian guys and stuff, and I know that they're trying hard too. They're all part of it.
Good stuff then. So yeah, I was there, and I was taking a lot of rejections, and that part I destroyed by myself. So I arrived to TNL in New York 2015, and I could really focus on the conversation skills, the meditation, which I had almost not practiced until then, except with yourself. Um, Understanding the female psychology, understanding all these things. So it was painful, though. I did suffer a lot during the workshop, but it was more because it's that constant rejection that you get. And for me, it resonated as, oh, it's because I'm not enough, because I'm not enough, because I'm not enough, because I'm not enough. So that really pushed that weak spot in me. And I don't know how, but after the workshop, there was a momentum that was created, like a virtuous circle, a good positive dynamics. And just by understanding the conversation skills and how women operate, I started getting better and better at Tinder, at approaching women on the street. And a few months later, for the first time in my life, I was having something like 4 or 5 lovers. I was like, fuck me, first time in my life it happens. That's awesome. It works. Like, something's been unblocked. Um, and then there was ups and downs, and I could elaborate on the journey, how it's been since then, and that's a whole different story by itself. I didn't think too much about what I could say about that, but yeah, ups and downs, a lot of ups and downs, but just like the markets, generally speaking, it goes up, right?
Right. The general upward trend with a bit of a roller coaster ride as you go.
Yes,
I
yes.
like that, man. Well, I guess the cool thing that you really highlighted, which I think is a big key for guys to really understand, is like being fixated on results alone is something that can really be painful because it works against you, even though it's really hard not to because you're trying to do something that is results based. So it's kind of like this paradox of like, I really just want to get girls. I want to get laid. I want to have sex. I want to have a hot girlfriend, or I want to have multiple hot girlfriends. But then there's this kind of other reality, which is that it's it's not guaranteed, and there are really no perfect ways to do it, even though there are definitely principles and strategies and tactics and mindsets and stuff that you can kind of adopt that make it useful. And that's where, and this is a good bridge, I think, that's where having a bit of a military mindset is good, because you really have to be like on the mission. It's like, all right, this is a fucking mission, and it's going to be shit, and it's going to be I'm going to have to push myself through the fucking swamp, and I'm going to have to carry my shit, and I'm going to have to do it because nobody else is going to fucking do it for me. And me being the so-called drill sergeant, I'm there just clapping along saying, get back out there, because you can do it, and I want to see you do it. I want to see you do 10 more. I want to see you do another one. Come on, let's do it. But there is a power and a virtue in that. And one of the biggest things that I think guys can really learn is that they need to learn to be their own best self, their own best coach, their own best kind of like drill sergeant. And it's not easy because, let's say the tired grunt inside of everybody is like, oh, I just want to fucking not do this. I don't want to have to face that stuff. And I can personally say I totally relate to that too. Like, it's not easy, but I think it's also important to say, it doesn't have to be one way. And maybe that's something that's really important to recognize. You don't have to go out and approach girls on the street like you've watched in YouTube and do that 100 times a week. That's not the way it needs to be. There's women everywhere. There's opportunities everywhere, and there's romance everywhere if you're aware of it. It's in the cafe when you're ordering a coffee. It's at the stoplight as you're crossing the street. It's in random places when you're not expecting it. Or maybe it is in your social circle. Maybe it is in the party that you go to. Maybe it's in somebody that you actually already know and you knew for a long time, but you didn't even realize that there's a great thing there. So there can be many, many ways to open this Pandora's box of what it means to be a romantic adventurer and to really say yes to what that means. But like, on that note, what have you got to say about bringing a military mindset and, like, let's say a fortitude or a strength or a focus or anything that you would correlate from your background in security and military to the journey of seduction and the journey of being a romantic adventurer?
Well, I think it's really what you said. It's in the beginning when it hurts, when it's scary, and you are like, okay, fuck it, I'm doing it anyway. Just like I remember doing it in Djibouti. If you've seen these French Foreign Legion TV shows, the cable over the desert, and that big cable you have to go down with a pulley or whatever it's called. It's scary, but you fucking do it anyway. And that's really something I learned in the Legion. All these jumping from heights and all that stuff I used to hate. Well, I've learned that was really in the Legion that I heard to just, how do you say that in English, to bite the bullet and just do it anyway. So there was a lot of that. And apparently I'm not the best example of that. I don't know the guy personally. I don't know if he still collaborates with TNL. I don't know exactly where he's at the moment. But I would love to meet Jordan, the Marine.
Yes.
And I've heard like he would grind like a motherfucker. Like he would have the biggest discipline nobody has ever seen in this. Anybody has ever seen in that kind of field. So he would just keep grinding all the time, and apparently get great results eventually. So I'm not the most extreme example, if you will. But really, to answer your question, I think, yeah, it's part of the conditioning of every soldier, especially in a good unit, even conventional units, but good units, to learn to get over the fear. Mm-hmm. And I used to be really scared of jumping from high things and that sort of stuff. I remember by the end of my 5 years in the Legion, I would just do it and I wouldn't even care. And I think I could relate that to the beginnings, the beginner's hell, as you guys like to call it, mm-hmm. where it's scary, but also there's a big dimension, and you guys insist a lot on that. What's that fear really about? You're not gonna get shot by these women. You're not gonna get punched. You're not. gonna get into anything really problematic, it's just your ego that's suffering. And becoming aware of that with meditation, with a lot of different things, it's it's what helped me. But really, to be honest, like I remember finishing that workshop, and I was staying one more week in New York just in case I would have met women, or just to keep approaching and take advantage of New York because it's a city I really love.
Yep.
And I was kind of devastated because my ego had taken so many punches. It's tough, man, to face that rejection so harshly sometimes, but these beautiful women.
Yeah.
It's really something I think us men are naturally, I don't know, it's a good question. Is it social construct or is it natural to be so scared of being rejected by beauty? Because you see that beauty you admire, and the message of that beauty is, oh, well, basically you're a piece of shit to me, you don't even exist. Well, it's what happens very often, but every now and then you have a great conversation, you take a number. Some guys ended up having sex with those girls. I think it's a lot about admitting that it's always going to be a scarce thing. um as a man, especially when you're young, you could without any problem fuck two or three different girls every 24 hours, and that's what you want. If it was there, you would take it. But reality is not that. I think it's much more about learning that a lot of the times you're going to spend a long time without having any sex, and instead of jerking off, you should actually keep it for yourself and build that energy. So when you really meet a woman, then the release of energy is absolutely beautiful. But we should all understand first that it's not when you want it, it's when you want it, which is pretty much all the time, almost, and when she wants it, which is very scarce for all sorts of natural reasons.
And that's where I think there's an archetype shift that's needed, and it's one of the biggest things that I really try to express to guys is like learning to be a lover. Like it's a thing. It's a mindset. It's a whole approach. And once again, you don't have to be it all the time, but if you want to be the kind of guy that gets, like, let's say, high level results from cold approach, then it's really, 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 really beneficial to become a connector, to be the kind of person that just connects with people everywhere, all the time, anytime, for no reason, just because you can. You know, and that means when you're at the supermarket checkout, you say a few extra words, you ask about her day, you tell her what's going on, you make a comment, you make a joke, you know, you look for eye contact, you look for opportunities, you say hi to people, you like, and it takes energy, it takes will, it takes choice. You have to actively go out into the world. And once again, it depends on where you are. Like I'm in Ukraine at the moment, which is not the most extroverted social environment. People here are relatively nice, but you know, and there can be language barriers. You know, and it sort of depends on the day. I mean, sometimes it's -20, and people just want to get out of the street as fast as possible. So it depends on many different dynamics, and I think that's also super important to recognize. Is that rather than personalizing all the details back to yourself as if it's like, oh, it's all about me, and you know, I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not suave enough, or I'm not skilled enough, or I don't have enough of this or enough of that, to just look at it like it's just doing reps. You know, it's like you just got to get out there and you got to build some foundations, you got to get some reference experiences, and if you pay attention, if you really do your homework, you will start to realize things like, when I go out between the hours of like 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, there's way more people than if I go out between the hours of 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Or, you know, on sunny days, and on sunny days, it's much easier to meet people than it is on cold, shitty days, you know, and that's got nothing to do with your looks or your lack of experience. It's got to do with context. And this is another thing that is super important. And I think, you know, there has been a big evolution that's happened over the history of seduction as I've been involved with it, because, you know, I'm technically one of the OGs these days. So it's like the like, if you look at it, seduction started out as a weird underground subculture of guys that was on some strange internet groups, and it was all about how to use hypnosis to try to steal women's sexuality so you could get what you wanted. Now, does that work? Well, maybe yes, sometimes if you're some kind of guy who really knows how to use that kind of technology, but most of the time it wasn't very effective. And mostly it wasn't very effective because guys were very uncalibrated. They didn't understand the larger dynamic of what they were doing. They had no experience. and they were weirdos. So that kind of becomes a negative combination of things. It's really hard to become, an attractive man. But then quick over time, things like evolutionary psychology started to come in, and then it was all about being cocky, funny, and how to have like more of a bit more of an attractive archetype. So it was more about like just looking at what are the characteristics of an alpha male and how do you become an alpha male. So then it became this kind of obsession with becoming an alpha male, and then it was also about technical skills, right? Which it still is to these days, but like because men are fascinated with technical stuff. So it was about, what's the technical system, oh, well, there's the ABC system, or there's the 1, 2, 3 system, or there's the whatever it is. And, those systems became very, very popular, and they became very popular around the time that The Natural started, around 2005, 6 or something, because that's when, the book, The Game came out, and everybody started talking about it because it was a bit of a phenomenon. And it's great. Like mainstream society loves stuff that looks like a product. And it's because mainstream society yet again is a reflection of a business model. It's a reflection of a kind of commodified reality. So anyway, 2015 was all about technical systems. And then that's kind of when we came on the scene. No, 2005, not 15, sorry, 2005. So by 2006, 2007, when The Natural Lifestyle started, we were coming from a very different approach. We were coming from a holistic approach. We were coming from a grounded approach. We were coming from a, let's say, direct, like that was the thing back in those days that was so mind blowing. It's like you just walk up to a girl and you tell her that she's pretty and you see if you can have a conversation with her. Now that was mind blowing for a lot of guys. It's like, no, but what about this technique or that technique or whatever? So the point was that it's been through this evolution. And now when we look at it these days, a lot of guys anyway that I see have become lifestyle designers. And that's awesome because that is a really good place to come from. It's like they've realized, and I don't think the younger generation realizes how much you're standing on the shoulders of giants that have gone before you. Because like for the young guys coming up into this community, it's awesome that the first thing that you learn about is things like diet and meditation and fitness and how to have a good social circle and how to have positive psychology. Because that's so much of a relief compared to the shit that everybody else had to go through like a decade ago. And I guess my point to all that is that these days it's turning into much more about a game of lifestyle. It's about who are you in the world and how do you make yourself somebody.
And that's healthy. That's healthy. I'm very happy it's turning this way.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So and if we really want to turn that up too, I mean, there is a dark side to that. I mean, there is a whole world of what you would call scenesters. So they're just rich people who hang out in different scenes and they have different roles and they play different games because they have the capacity to do that. But I think for most people, like if you're not a multimillionaire and you don't want to spend $10,000 a week on women, then the best way to become somebody that has a lot of abundance and has a lot of choice and has a lot of freedom and has a lot of good stuff in your life, like a lot of love and a lot of power and a lot of wisdom, is to become a rich man inside yourself first, to find your passions, to build yourself up, and to make friends with people that are in alignment with you. So if you're into music and martial arts and if you're into travel, then get into that stuff, like learn about it, enjoy it, become passionate about it. And it's also about learning to build, a real social circle, not a fake one. Like be somebody that's real, be somebody that brings something real to the world around you and you can kind of work on that. So I think the reason I'm mentioning that is because it's about, how can you look at developing, like, how can you look at your love life and how can you look at your sex life as an extension of your lifestyle, as opposed to what used to be the opposite. What most guys would do would be like, oh, I want to have a sex life, so I have to have a lifestyle. It's the opposite. It starts with the lifestyle first and the sex life arises out of that. And I love what you said about, cultivating your energy and bringing your focus back to yourself and not wasting your energy, which is hard too. I know it's hard for guys to not get tempted by porn, to not get tempted by these quick releases and these simple junk food kind of answers to life. And we have to pay attention that in some sense, if there is an enemy, the enemy is our weakness, our temptations to be taken for a ride and to allow our attention and our power to be given to lesser elements. And there's plenty of opportunities for that to happen. You know what I mean? Like Netflix is staring at us all day, every day and saying, watch me, watch me, watch me.
Even myself, and I'm almost ashamed to admit it, but with the current situation, There's absolutely, well, not absolutely, but not much you can do. I started watching series, which I've never done before.
Yeah.
I may even start video games, and I don't want it, but at the same time, I also have a job where, I when I'm at work, I cannot go out after a certain time, etc., etc. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's only as much reading and financial self-education you can do, and workout you can do, and stretching and yoga and meditation you can do. At some point, there's going to be some hours that are just like that, and it's also normal, man. I go work for 6 weeks. In the beginning, I will watch porn and jerk off because it's human. So it's very important to recognize all that as the enemy, but also forgive yourself when you are not perfect, and you give in. I mean, we're not at a stage in our lives where we are absolutely perfect, and either meditating or cultivating our ikigai or that kind of things. That takes time. You got to realize it takes time. And I'm always amused and I'm always laughing at these people who are in their 30s and pretend to be super spiritual and super achieved and super developed. I'm like, no, man, it takes a lot more time than that.
Right, right,
You
right.
have your escapisms, you have your little junk food kind of shit, not just for food, but for everything else.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
It's a process. It takes a lot of time, and you want to forgive yourself when you are not perfect.
I love it. Yeah, I love that. And it also brings up a really good point too, which is that it's not about like the bad things you do, it's about the good things that you do with the bad things that you do. So it's kind of like you can turn anything into a practice. And I've learned this, and it sounds like a bizarre thing and some people might not understand this, but some of the most high level spiritual teachings and some of the most high level spiritual understandings that I've come across in all my years of doing a lot of research and development and my own practices of working with different people and guides and stuff is that you can use porn as a meditation. You can play video games as a way to become more focused and strong. But it's also about like making quality choices. And sometimes we don't have that choice, but to try to, as best as you can, recognize, okay, if I'm going to watch porn, I'm going to watch good porn. I'm going to watch porn that's going to be nourishing, or it's going to be powerful, or it's going to help me to do something, or even use it as a training. It's like, all right, I'm going to see how long I can last before I ejaculate. I'm going to learn, I'm going to see if I can like turn this into an opportunity so that next time I am with a woman, I have more will, more control, more of an ability to do something. So, and I think yet again, it's hard for people who don't know what they don't know, because we have to forgive ourselves for knowing what we don't know. But at the same time, there's no excuse either. So it kind of goes both ways in the sense of like, nobody's going to give you a free ride because you're ignorant of something. So you have to take responsibility for learning and being
Yeah,
your own
for
master.
sure. Yeah.
So, and that's a hard balance to sort of recognize for young guys as well, is how to, how to become a master of your own choices, even if nobody's guiding you to help you to do that. And I think it's something that, it's a little bit different because, we're getting a little bit older, we're middle-aged guys now. And I think it is like, we live in a world where it's so easy to live in a virtual reality these days. It's so easy to just stare at your
Yeah.
phone. And I mean, I do it too. I'm totally sucked into looking at screens all the time because I have to, because it's part of my job. It's part of what I do. And I wish I could spend more time in nature and doing things, and I will when I get the chance. But it's also, it's hard when people get so pulled towards that. So I think it brings up another higher level thing, and it's a little bit of a segue that, it's probably beyond this podcast. But ultimately, as human beings, like, we're moving into a super technologically advanced reality, and we really need to catch up with that. We need to become bigger than our technology. We need to really train ourselves that technology is part of us, not that we're part of technology, because it's about who's got the bigger frame, And this is something that also comes up in all the stuff we've been talking about too. It's an attitude. It's like, if you want to be good at something, then you have to dominate that thing. And that's not a negative thing. It's like, you have to be bigger than that. So, okay, I want to get better with women. Well, great. So go out there and start learning what it means to be better with women. But remember that you're becoming something that is powerful, and who you're becoming 6 months from now is bigger than who you are today. So it's okay that today was a shit show. It's okay that today wasn't good. It's okay that you had to go through some suffering now, because suffering now means strength tomorrow, or it means breakthroughs next week, or it means power in a month. And
Yep.
I think that's one, and maybe that's something I'd like to hear a bit about your attitude towards. But I know with myself, that's almost like a creator mindset. Like, it's something that I say to people sometimes too, is like, if you want to give yourself a magic ability to be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, then you got to start thinking from outcomes. You got to start thinking from who you are on the other side of the battle before you even fought the battle as the winner. Because if you're not the winner before you start, then there's a good chance you're not going to make it through. There's a good chance you're going to fall over and then cry about what's happening because you don't have the intent. You don't have that winning mindset, which is so important. And it's not about judging yourself for not having that, because that's the other reality that we're talking about too, is like, it's okay to fucking feel shit sometimes. It's okay to have a cry. It's okay to be heartbroken. It's okay to get hurt by things and to acknowledge the fact that you've been hurt by something that wasn't good. But it's also important to recognize that you are not supposed to identify with that any longer than you have to. It's like, maybe you just have to process it, move it through your awareness. And one of the biggest gifts that I think guys can get, and it's got to do with romantic, adventurous, spiritual warrior, is you need to learn to be the balance point in all of that. So you're romantic, you're adventurous, you're spiritual, you're a warrior, but really you're none of those things. You're all of those things and something else as well, which always gives you a kind of a way out. And I think that's super important. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you are your own center, and you get bombarded with all sorts of things that come from everywhere. Like, abundance is there. You can attract virtually anything in this world nowadays, and it's up to you to be the organizing principle, to choose where you want to go, what you want to be. Yeah, I'm talking very abstract now.
I love it though, man. I love it. You know why? Because exactly what you just said, the organizing principle that's making sense of who you want to be and where you want to go, that's the king. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Like that's the king energy, because the king energy needs to be there. And it's, once again, it's hard for guys to recognize the power of this, and I think you can speak from that place, because I think you're qualified to, like, being a strong, independent man that has been his own center for, a consistent amount of time. Like, how has that affected your life as opposed to somebody who doesn't have that, do you think?
Oh yeah, well, if I hadn't been that, I would be in a normal job, aligned with what society wants, repressing my own needs and wants, and probably escaping through alcohol or food or something even worse, maybe. Yeah, there was one thing I wanted to say much earlier, actually, which I can say now, is by all means, and I'm sure that would be good advice for the young guys out there, follow your intuition. Definitely follow your intuition. It's gonna mislead you, but it misleads you, but it doesn't mislead you. Actually, it can lead you towards something that you didn't think was what you thought it was. Right? You make mistakes, but that's how you learn, and you learn for your next experience, etc., etc. If you keep following your intuition, it's gonna be hard, because it's not gonna be what you thought it was, but you're definitely gonna evolve. And each time I've had to make a choice in this life, making a choice is giving up on some other things. Like, no situation is perfect. No choice is 100%. Sometimes it was scary. It was scary to leave and go to the Legion, but it was also scary to leave the Legion and to get myself out there in the big bad civilian world. Civilian, civilian between, how do you call these things? Whatever.
Between missions. So what do you mean?
No, I say civilian because it's a civilian job, but you're only with ex-military guys. You are in dangerous countries. You're very often still carrying weapons. So yeah, like it's civilian,
like a civilian contractor of some kind. Yeah.
Yeah, civilian between dashes.
The commas. Yeah.
No, all right, okay, now you get it. Right. So following your intuition, and it's gonna be painful, and there's gonna be what you could take it as mistakes, but I take it as learning opportunities. That's what rock bottom is all about, right? If you're in a swimming pool or in a lake or in a big mass of water and you hit rock bottom, well, you push on it and you get back out of the water. That's how you need to hit rock bottom sometimes. The last time I really felt like I hit it was in the UK, early 2018. I was a personal trainer in a gym. It's a shit job in the UK, man. You don't even get paid for it. You have to volunteer. So you hope to get some clients that just broken up after a relationship that started super fast, escalated way too quickly with a woman, and she broke my heart in the shittiest way. And it was 10:30 p.m. waiting for my bus under the rain. after I'd finished working in my shitty job that I wasn't even getting paid for, and I was like, man, that's when you want to have an ego.
Yeah.
That's when the ego is important. That's when the ego saves you. You're like, man, I'm worth better than that.
Hmm.
I can do much better than that. I'm not happy here.
Yeah.
That's fucking shit, man. Let's get out of here.
Love it.
And it's part of life. When I look back, I don't know if it's the human brain or whatever, but when I look back, and I'm quite fond of these memories.
Hmm.
Like if I compare with now, where my job is established, my job is comfortable. Because yeah, my current job is management, so I do a lot of time in an office,
Hmm.
aircon office, accommodated in an international hotel, good wages. Like I don't struggle much these days, to be honest, except with the lack of freedom of this shitty situation. But my current situation is comfortable. But when I look back, I'm like, whoa, that was something. Like I was on the emotional roller coaster, and that's being alive. And that's something you gotta keep in mind so you don't get into too much comfort and you create some kind of struggle that pushes you forward. So you don't get bored. It's a bit hard sometimes, but it pushes you forward. And that's actually my big challenge at the moment right now is I quite don't know what my next challenge should be or how I should challenge myself.
Hmm.
So I'm still in my comfort bubble. It's very easy. It's been lasting for a year, but now I'm feeling like okay, I want to find at least something that's gonna kick me out of my comfort zone.
Hmm. I love it. I love it. Yeah, it brings a lot to mind, and I think the thing that I would take from that is like when you're young, go hard and make mistakes, and be
Definitely.
prolific. Be
Yeah.
prolific with everything that you do. Something that I'm really grateful for that I did when I was young, and I didn't have an easy time either. I mean, I was sick for a lot of my 20s. I was exhausted. I couldn't do the things I needed to do. I was experiencing severe poverty. So there was things that were happening in my life at that time where I was forced to just be by myself a lot. I was forced to use that time that most people were probably spending getting drunk and distracting themselves with all kinds of fun things. I was forced to sit by myself and read a lot of books and have a lot of deep conversations with people that were older than me because I was really looking for answers and I was looking to try to make sense of what was happening. But what I'm really happy about is I was prolific. I wrote a lot, I thought a lot, I did a lot. Even if all I could do was sit in my bedroom, I was still prolific, and I would create things because I felt like creating. So whatever you are and whoever you are out there, just go hard, make mistakes, be prolific, and you'll learn fast. And I think that's the thing we're talking about with pickup too. If you want to get good at talking to women, if you want to get good at being able to get dates or being able to be sexual with women, well, you've got to create the context where you do that a lot and you have to get the feedback. And the faster you can get the feedback and the more you can get the feedback, the faster you can adjust. And you've got to realize that this is another key thing is that it's not about just doing the same 10 steps over and over again, even though you might be doing the same 10 steps. It's about doing the same 10 steps with consciousness, with awareness, to make sure that
Yeah.
you get better and better and better. So you're not repeating your same mistakes. You're learning from your mistakes. And if you see that you're stuck, if you see that you're plateauing, well, you need more references. You need to go and find some more models, some more mentors, some more brothers, some more people to bring into your world so that you can make your feedback systems and your self-coaching mechanisms a bit more sophisticated, which I think is super important. So I'm thinking we should wrap up pretty soon. I'm not sure if there's much else you want to say, but the one last thing I wanted to say or ask you was speaking to yourself 5 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago, what would you teach yourself if you could give yourself some magical advice?
Well, definitely buy shares of Texas Instruments and Starbucks. No, but really, money, that's a whole different topic we could talk about. That would have been very easy to avoid all the investment mistakes I've made in real estate and stuff. My real estate investments, some of them were good, some of them were bad. I would definitely teach myself some of that. That would be the primary thing because I would have built so much wealth just with time accumulating that I would be a bit more free nowadays. That's for the very down to earth stuff.
Yeah.
Now, women, I would be very specific about women. I would teach myself all the things I hadn't understood by then. Understand it's not a matter of being enough or not enough. Everybody struggles to have meaningful relationship with the opposite sex. That it's for women, it's basically all about being aligned with yourself mainly. That's really mainly that. As as mundane as it sounds, that's really that. I would teach myself to be less intimidated by the guys who've had the great, awesome military career, because they had that at the expense of other things. I know guys who've had great military careers who are absolute shitty human beings. I know some of them, and I back then 5 or 10 years ago, I was still like, oh my god, oh yeah, oh you're so much this and so much that, and I haven't done nothing, so fuck that. Like, hold my own space and be proud of what I've got and what I have, and yeah, be my own reference. Be, generally speaking, learning to be a bit more my own compass instead of constantly relying on something external. But yeah, I guess that's something like my friends kept telling me that for 10 years, but I had to experience it myself before getting there. So yeah, job, money, women, it's pretty much what I think I would tell myself. I haven't reflected a lot about that, but
yeah, that's all good, man.
I think that would be the main things.
So I guess technically you were still on track though, right? Even if you could time travel back and give yourself advice, you still were doing a lot of the right things to get yourself where you needed to be, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, there would not be any radical change in the journey. Like I don't feel like I have missed a turn yet in life.
Fantastic.
Like I really think I did the best with the citizenship I had, with the circumstances I had. I don't think that I have any regret, and yeah, that's kind of cool. I don't think everybody can say that, so it's a good thing for sure.
Absolutely. And it sounds like, and this is something for you to kind of consider moving forward, it sounds like your next challenges are going to be around being the king, because it's like you've been processing the warrior and the lover for a while, and now it's really about becoming that central organizing principle and moving forward. And maybe it's about the magician too. So maybe there's a bit of growth in terms of what it means to be the creator of your reality in new and interesting ways as well.
That sounds very advanced, but yes, that's what it is. At the moment, I'm asking myself shitloads of questions. I've had a lot of reflecting around the concept of ikigai. I know you are familiar with it. Basically, what makes you get up from your bed in the morning, and not just for yourself, but for the others. And I have to admit that 2020 has been quite a blow. I think I mentioned that in prior conversation with you, because you want to feel useful to other fellow human beings. That's something that's just normal evolution of a man. And after 2020, I'm like, really? Is there anything I can teach to those people who just want to be scared and listen to their government and wear their fucking mask and all that stuff? Is there anything I could say that they would listen to?
Yeah.
So it's first world problems, right? That's my problems at the moment. That's my issue. So
I think on that note, quickly, man, it's like what Nietzsche wrote about thus spoke Zarathustra. You know, he had this story of this character who went up to the mountain to learn to become enlightened, and he became enlightened, and he had so much wisdom pouring out of him because he'd done all the right things that he needed to come back to the world and give it to everybody. And as he was running down the mountain with all this wisdom that he wanted to share with himself, share from himself, he ran into an old man who said, "What are you up to?" And he sort of said, "Oh, I've become enlightened and I want to go and share all this knowledge with people." And the old man said, "Haha, well, good luck with that, because nobody's going to listen, and they're probably just going to, call you insane." Which he thought, well, we'll see what happens. And then he went to the town square and he started to try to teach his ways. And of course, he was met with skepticism and frustration, and people trying to attack him in various ways. But I think the magic ingredient is what happened next. So then what he did was he just decided, well, it's about sharing what he had learned with the people that were ready for it, and sharing what he had with the people that were really there. And that's my objective, man. And that's something that I want to also thank you for being like a brother in the circle for. And even though we haven't connected that much, I really appreciate you as a force. You are a force, and you are recognized. And
thank you very much.
I feel you out there, man. And I hope some guys that are listening can vibe off us a little bit and take some permission and take some authority and take some good vibes.
And that's something inspirational for me as well, thinking of yourself and TNL generally as well. You guys have never really been mainstream. You guys were always for a niche of guys who had the balls, who had the brains, who had the capacity of thinking outside the box.
Right.
So maybe I should get myself a lot more inspired by guys like yourselves.
Go ninja, man. Go the ninja. Honestly, I think the future is this is what the future is going to be. It's going to be more and more compartmentalized specializations, and but it's beautiful too, because why not? I mean, and the beautiful side of that is, and this is something I'm very excited about, is moving forward as the world becomes more and more able to facilitate bubbles of reality. Why not hang out with the ultimate group? Why not become your own best friends? You know, why not create a
Yeah,
feedback loop?
create your tribe. That's
Yeah,
also something I'm reflecting a lot about at the moment.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
something to learn. That me too. I got to learn a lot about these things. There's so many great things to experience and to learn. So, with all that being said, is there anything else you want to say to kind of conclude, and we'll wrap up?
No, I think, well, I could take the opportunity to rant about all these things I hate in the world at the moment and stuff, but yeah, nah, that wouldn't bring anything good on the table. So, nah. No, I think it's been amazing chat. We've been over the time we thought we would, but that's no problem because it was good quality discussion, and hopefully a few guys out there can listen to this and it can spark a bit of their own reflecting and acting.
Love it. I love it.
Really, that's it. I'm gonna have to do some stuff here, and I'm sure you get stuff to do as well.
Yeah,
And
we get into the day. Yep. But I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for your time. And maybe we'll do a part two at some other stage, and we can talk about king stuff. We can talk about money. We can talk about other things that I know you've got some insights with. But yeah, till then, man, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everybody listening, because you know, this has been a pleasure. And make sure you stay tuned, stay subscribed, and hopefully you're already in some of my groups, or you're associated with what we're doing with the natural lifestyles and with the Liberated Man community. And let's kick ass onwards and upwards, strength to strength.
well, I am thanking you for sure. It's been an honor, and yeah, who knows? 10 years, 15 years from now, 5 years from now, once we have progressed a little bit more, if we are not in jail by then.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Bless you, brother. Bless you. Thank you.